No. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Yes, I hear some feedback. I will just continue on. I'm not sure what to do about that. Okay, welcome to tonight's program, Resisting Israel's Attacks on Palestine. It's a very timely program, very important program, and features many or several very strong speakers and many commenters from co-sponsoring organizations. My name is Madeline Hoffman, and I am the moderator for tonight's program. I am the co-chair of the Green Party Political Action Committee. Yes, and I'm going to ask everyone to mute their microphones if you're not speaking, please. So I am honored to moderate this program. As I mentioned, I'm the co-chair of, it's not me. I was speaking before without any feedback whatsoever. Anyway. Yeah, can somebody mute Jerome Bauer? Is that possible? There we go. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so we'll reset. My name is Madeline Hoffman. I am the co-chair of the Green Party's Political Action Committee on a national level. And I am also the Green Party of New Jersey's candidate for governor here in New Jersey in 2021. And I also am someone for whom this issue is very, very important. I visited the West Bank in 2013, in December of 2013, quite a while ago by this point, but still the issue matters a great deal to me and is something that I've spoken out about many times ever since. The ugly truth of what is happening in Palestine, in the West Bank and Gaza, is all too often either hidden or distorted by media silence and manipulation. However, when people see what is happening with their own eyes, like I did, or hear about what is happening from people who have been or are there, that experience and knowledge stays with them and fuels their anger and underscores the need for resistance. You can't unsee how the Israeli Defense Forces and the police protect and reinforce the aggressive actions of the settlers or the steady drive for de facto annexation of most of the West Bank. This situation for the Palestinians exemplifies colonialism throughout the world and must be stopped. Tonight, we are fortunate to have a panel of eyewitnesses share their experiences with us. I first would like to ask AWDAH if he is here, but he is not. So I will ask ZAKI BARUTI to begin. ZAKI BARUTI is, introduce him more formally. ZAKI BARUTI is President and General of the Universal African Peoples Organization and was the 2000 Green Party candidate for Missouri governor. He has been a TV host, radio host, and a decades-long leader in St. Louis area struggles against police violence. He publishes the African News World and is a retired educator and author of educational booklets. ZAKI? ZAKI?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I want to thank the moderator for her kind introduction. Also, I want to thank the organizers for putting together this very needed webinar dealing with the issue of resisting Israel's attacks on Palestine. I want to begin my remarks in the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Kwame Ture, also known as Stokely Carmichael, the Black is Back Coalition, Progressive Black Movement, and the Universal African Peoples Organization, who have historically expressed solidarity with the Palestinian people who have faced ongoing oppression and brutality from the Zionist state of Israel, which exemplifies colonialism in its rawest and most satanic evilness, which has been supported by the United States government since its illegal creation in 1948, when Harry Truman, 11 minutes after the illegal Zionist state was declared this so-called independence, recognized it as a state. I started my statement with, in the spirit of Dr. King, because in the backdrop of the Zionist state, the people that support, or the government that is the strongest supporter of Israel, is the United States government, which Dr. King clearly laid out as the greatest purveyor of violence. He also stated that the three triple evils of the United States: racism, poverty, and militarism. I say Malcolm X and Kwame Ture because they were staunch anti-Zionists. And I'm also very proud to say that our organization, the Universal African Peoples Organization, was a member of the worldwide African anti-Zionist movement spearheaded by Kwame Ture, also known as Stokely Carmichael, with the support of the Mataba, which was based in Libya under the leadership of Muammar Gaddafi, who, as everyone knows, his government was destroyed by the United States with the support of the United States. As well as our organization is part of the Black is Back Coalition, and part of our 19 points of self-determination. Point number 18 states, free Palestine, down with Israeli apartheid. We demand recognition of all rights of the Palestinian people, including the right to an independent, sovereign Palestine state, and the right to return for all Palestinian refugees. The United States must immediately end all monetary aid, trade relationships, and military cooperation with the apartheid Zionist state of Israel until that uniquely barbaric affront to human civilization is dismantled and abolished. In that, the United States is the backdrop of support for Israel. We have to understand that much of our struggle to resist Israeli attacks on Palestine has to have a focus on the United States government. It is the United States government that historically provides 1/3 of its entire US foreign aid to the Zionist state of Israel, which also Israel only comprised just 1/1000th of the world's population. And although it has one of the world's highest per capita income, not only does Israel receive foreign aid to help it commercially, it also has an abundance of military aid that comes from the United States that props up the Zionist state. However, it should come as no surprise that the United States is a great supporter of Israel, because the United States in of itself was born out of evil, the evilness of the genocide that took place against the Native Americans, the 100 years of enslaving African people, the 100 years of lynching that took place after so-called slavery was ended, and what we have today, the ongoing police brutality and murder of African people, which is reflective of a system that is evil, and barbaric under capitalism, colonialism, and imperialism. And what is happening is Palestine is a reflection of a United States foreign policy steeped in murder and brutality. And just a few examples of that includes the United States invasion and occupation of Haiti from 1915 through 1934, where over 20,000 Haitians lost their lives during that period, and where racial animus was in full force by the United States troops, which all the way up into 2004 under the democratic elected presidency of Aristide was removed through the United States forces. Another example of the United States foreign policies that impacted humanity was the United States inspired coup of the democratic elected government of Iran in 1953, along with the ongoing inspired coup against Patrice Lumumba led by the CIA in the Congo, along with the United States support of the apartheid regime of South Africa and Rhodesia. The attempt of the United States government to overthrow the Cuban Revolution through the Bay of Pigs invasion and the continuing evil embargo of Cuba. Even as most recently in the United Nations, over 180 countries voted to end the embargo and only 2 countries voted to support it, which was the United States and Israel. The destruction of Libya, as well as the efforts to destabilize Venezuela. So with that being said, it is our recommendation, the Universal African Peoples Organization, when we talk about resisting the attacks on Palestine by Israel, we say then that to counter that, we have to create and do certain kinds of actions that will, number one, create a massive campaign to educate the masses of our people here in the United States with what's taking place in Palestine. The problem that we have in terms of not enough folks understanding what's going on is that we do not have enough folks being educated about the situation. So every progressive-minded person that's part of this webinar, we need to commit and become organized through newspapers, articles, through whatever media that we can control, that we can get out to the masses of the people to, number one, educate the people about what's taking place in terms of the murder and the brutality that is taking place in Palestine. We also need to create a political movement that also exposes the Israeli government. And when I say a political movement, we have to begin to have candidates that are not fearful of expressing what's going on and the barbaric treatment of the Palestinian people in the upcoming 2022 elections, national and state elections. Ideally, we should have progressives all across this country. There will be 33 United States Senate seats up for elections, as well as 36 governorships, I believe. Then we should, if we're serious about dealing with supporting the Palestinian people, we need to recruit candidates that's willing to put that on the agenda and advertise that. We also need to identify those politicians that have been bought and paid for by the Israeli government to foster the support that is given each and every day to the Israeli Zionist government. Along with that, though, there needs to be a creation of a Palestinian lobbyist group that can also reach out and prayerfully be able to change some of the thinking of some of the elected national leadership in Congress. And last but not least, we have to build and support the economic boycott of the BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement. We have to give it more momentum, more support as a way of, again, resisting the attacks on the Palestinian people. I know on one recent webinar, it was a very powerful video that showed clearly the death and the destruction that has wreaked havoc on the Palestinian people by the Israeli Defense Force. I'm speaking that kind of videos and propaganda from our perspective need to be put forward in the public light. So I want to just close with free Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine, down with Israeli Zionism, or down with the Zionist state of Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, ZAKI. Some of what you said reminded me that I believe in the last 3 or 4 months, there has been a lot of Palestinian resistance, visible Palestinian resistance to what is happening in Israel with the Zionist state. And that I believe some of what you've been talking about more education, more information, I think things are shifting because of that resurgence of Palestinian activism. But I'm sure we'll hear more about that later on. Thank you again, ZAKI BARUTI. Our next speaker, and I should say we have 2 or 3 more speakers, and then comments from co-sponsoring organizations. So everybody listening, you know what the agenda is. So our next speaker is Bob SUBERI, and Bob SUBERI is the son of immigrants from Jerusalem and a dual citizen of the United States and Israel, a Vietnam War veteran and a member of the Green Party of St. Louis. He spent 3 months living in a Palestinian village from March to June of 2021. So he was just recently there. He is currently active in Veterans for Peace, Friends of Bethlehem, St. Louis, and the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. And he has slides to share.
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me all right. I want to thank you all for tuning in. It's nice to see some alumni from CJNV, the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. Hi, Dave, and Veterans for Peace members, and some familiar faces. I'd like to thank the Green Party of St. Louis for putting this webinar on. And I'd really like to thank AWDAH if he comes on. It's 3 o'clock in the morning in Palestine. And I want to thank Yonatan. I think I saw him. You'll be impressed with Yonatan. He has quite a compelling story. And I won't be a spoiler. So I want to thank them for joining this discussion. Also, Yonatan, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning for Yonatan. Okay, yeah, my name is Bob SUBERI. I grew up in a Jewish Zionist household. I traveled to Israel many times since 1970 to visit family and friends. However, it never occurred to me to go to Palestine or to visit Palestine for any reason. It was kind of a no-go for a good Jewish boy. So because of some things that I heard and saw in 2006 on a delegation to Israel, I decided my curiosity was piqued. So in 2020, I made my first trip to Palestine a year and a half ago with the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. It was a 10-day tour, basically, centered around an action. And I got to meet some Palestinians. I got to see where they live, how they live. And I got to meet some really courageous, smart, and dedicated Jewish activists that are trying to do something about the situation and bring attention to it. And as ZAKI was saying, we don't know about it because none of the news from the West End gets out. And if it does get out, it never ends up in the mainstream media. And that's why what we're doing here is really important, and other people are doing it as well. So in March, I had the opportunity to live in the village of Khair, which is a Bedouin village in the South Hebron Hills. I was there for almost 3 months as part of a pilot program through the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. Our mission was to accompany Palestinians and to document their activities and interactions with the occupying forces. We were there long enough to develop close relationships with our Palestinian partners, as well as their children and their communities. And we were also working alongside a group of very gutsy Israeli activists who are still there, you know, doing the same things that we were doing together. We also had the chance to meet some Israeli and Palestinian human rights organizations, to meet the people in them and to work with them. Tayush, for one, All That's Left, Breaking the Silence, Youth of Sumud, in addition to many individual Palestinian activists. If you put the first slide up, Joe, this is a map of the South Hebron Hills. The inset is the West Bank. So this gives you kind of an idea of where the South Hebron Hills is located in the West Bank. I don't have a pointer, but this area is also called Masafer Yatta. Yatta is the large city in this area. So we were based in, all of us activists, there are about 15 of us, were based in 3 different villages. And yet we were called out to many different parts of the South Hebron Hills. We were there through the month of Ramadan, and during the intense violence that erupted towards the end of Ramadan as a result of Palestinian evictions in East Jerusalem and the incursion of Israeli forces in the Al-Aqsa compound. At that point, things went from bad to worse. In the short time that I have here, I can only give you a few brief examples of events that happened, what we participated in. So listen close, because I'm going to talk fast. None of what we experienced was covered in the mainstream media. However, in the chat, I'm going to put some links. Please look at them. There's some excellent videos and some excellent articles by both Israeli and Palestinian journalists who I know personally, and I can vet them. So I can vouch for them. So anyways, please check the chat. There's also a link in there for a fundraiser for the Khair Library, which I have to give a plug to because I was involved in the beginning of it. Please read about that and maybe consider donating. Also, please feel to contact me directly if anyone has any questions or wants more information. Okay. Palestinian communities in the South Hebron Hills are mainly agricultural communities, relying primarily on food crops for themselves and grains and grazing land for their livestock. Palestinians are constantly harassed and attacked by settlers who are illegally occupying their land and who restrict shepherds' access to their land and their water. The IDF and the settlers work in close coordination. This is really important. They work in close coordination with one another to force Palestinians off their land and into crowded urban areas. That is the modus operandi. That's how it works. The incidents I'll describe are just a few very isolated examples, and I can't even go into much detail of the events that occurred. But the first one I'll talk about is one of the first places we went when we first arrived, Al-Arais, it's called. We called it Saeed's land, and I'll explain why. Next slide, please. Saeed Alian's family owns land close to the illegal, vicious settlement of Mitzpah Yair. Settlers have claimed the land, and it is now officially, quote unquote, in dispute. As a standard operating procedure, the IDF had declared it a closed military zone so that the Palestinians can't access it, you know, for crops or whatever. So Saeed and his family would come every week, and they'd come to the edge of the restricted land and picnic. And the children would play, they'd play ball, they'd run around. They've been doing this every Saturday for many, many years in an effort to assert and keep the establishment of their ownership. Photo 2, please. This is Saeed after a May 13th attack. They were there on May 13th, which is another Saturday. Saeed and his wife were viciously attacked by the settlers from Mitzpah Yair. They were attacked with rocks, bats, metal pipes. They were there trying to protect their children. Saeed had to have his jaw completely rebuilt, you know, with metal plates and wires and everything. This was one of the few times that Saeed's family visited unaccompanied by activists. And this is when they got brutally beaten. There's an article in the chat on this. It's written by a Palestinian activist I know extremely well. Please read it, it's a great article. Next photo, please. As soon as he was out of the hospital, he accompanied his family back to their weekly visits, back to their land. This was one of the first times, this was the first time I was there accompanying them. As soon as we got there, we saw the bloody body parts of slaughtered sheep that covered the children's playground. It was thrown there by settlers. So, you know, this gives you an idea of where their head's at, you know, if they'll treat children this way. So this is a work of religious, and I'm a Jew, religious settlement Jews on the holy day of Shabbat. When the Palestinian property owners removed the carcasses, the IDF soldiers made them drag it back. Imagine that. We accompanied Saeed and his family every Saturday. The second village I want to talk about is Tuba. The village of Tuba relies primarily on sheep and goats for their livelihood. We regularly accompanied Tuba's shepherds while grazing because of another extremely aggressive settlement called Mitzpah Yair. They would harass and attack them daily. Settlers would block Palestinian access to water cisterns while grazing. I saw them and filmed them driving their ATVs into their herds. I have videos of them pushing them around, insulting them, all the while Palestinians cannot raise a finger against the settlers or they will be killed. And that is not an overstatement. And in fact, that's what the settlers are trying to do, is get a reaction from them. The police and IDF would always arrive and settle any disputes by chasing the Palestinian shepherds off their own land. This is a hilly area. So one day the IDF declared that all the ridges belonged to the Jews. This meant that the shepherds could not cross over from one valley to the next, essentially eliminating their access to most of their grazing land, not to mention their water sources. Next slide, please. As a result, the village of Tuba had to pony up tens of thousands of shekels to buy feed or else lose their herds. A week later in the night, settlers set fire to their new supply of feed. This is actually a video. I took this video myself. There's a saying, what Israeli soldiers don't demolish by day, settlers burn at night. Okay, I want to jump to the village of Tuani. The village of Tuani borders the outpost of Habat Ma'on. That's the one that set the fire and the one that hassles the shepherds. It is the target of the most frequent and violent attacks. And the reason it's the most frequent target is because 20 activists worked with international advocates and fought hard to acquire a master plan. A master plan means they can pave the roads, they can have paved roads, they can have utilities, and they can get building permits. So it's almost a regular village. But for this reason, the Israeli Civil Administration and the settlers at Habat Ma'on would like nothing more than to see 20 disappear. So there's constant daily attacks, shootings, arrests, and there's always something happening in 20. It happens daily and sometimes more than once a day. Typical scenario. Settlers attacked the fields, the growing fields. Next slide, please. They'll burn their protection, their shelters for their animals, their feed storage. Next slide, please. This is, they're setting fire to some of their crops. Next slide, please. And this is animal shelter that they burned. And then Palestinians, of course, will defend their land. They'll also defend their neighbors. Next slide, please. These are Palestinians fending off 30, I counted them. In fact, I took this photo, 30 settlers. And it was a standoff until the IDF showed up. IDF showed up, they lobbed tear gas and stun grenades at us and the Palestinians in order to protect the settlers, who then emerge under the protection of the IDF. They have pistols, they have assault rifles, they have rocks, and they have slings. This is when people get hurt. Next slide, please. This is them coming out of hiding when the IDF arrives. Next slide, please. This is them again. This is what they look like. This is, we see these guys every day. Next slide, please. So the next day or 2 days later, the civil administration and the IDF come and they start arresting Palestinian activists, for being troublemakers. This is SOP, man. This is how it happens. So the police come, they raid and vandalize property, they break windows, they break down doors, they'll terrorize the community under the pretext of making arrests of troublemakers. They only arrest Palestinians, focusing on activists who are generally the first victims of settler violence. They never arrest settlers. Next slide, please. This is them breaking into a house. Next slide, please. This is a Palestinian activist who was shot through the leg with live ammunition. This does happen. This happened on the same excursion. Next slide, please. This is this is a Palestinian whose arm was broken by a settler. We drove him to the hospital to have it set. And I want to relay this story because the attitude of the Palestinians is something that it's hard to wrap my head around. These guys put up with this stuff daily, and yet they keep an attitude of nonviolence and of humor that I quite don't understand, because I was scared shitless, pardon my French. On the way back, this guy with the broken arm was in the back seat with his friend Fuad, who is also a photographer and an activist. And they were laughing. And I'm wondering, what are they laughing about? What is so funny about, getting your arm broken? And I look back and he raises his arm and he says, well, I guess I shouldn't have skipped prayer this morning. It was Ramadan. And that's a typical Palestinian sense of humor that goes along with their steadfastness, or sumud, as they call it. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the village of 20. This is the house that we stayed in, and this is our group of friends and our Palestinian partners that we became very close with. The Palestinians are demonized by the occupation forces in order to justify their brutal treatment. And so we have to portray them as the humans that they are, as the all-around humans that they are. What I saw is exactly that, their humanity and their courage. They're not terrorists, they are being terrorized. I watched them rebuild demolished homes. Excuse me. Demolished homes and destroyed fields for umpteen times. I was awed by their respect for others and their unreserved, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Their unreserved affection for their children. I was humbled by the commitment to their community and their generosity. They accepted us into their lives. Anyway, the horrors go on daily, but you don't hear about it. We're too busy talking about apartheid. Is it apartheid? Is it not apartheid? Or what about Ben and Jerry's, blah, blah, blah. The extinguishing of Palestine is shrouded by misinformation, deception, and distraction, as ZAKI was saying. Israel cannot do what they're doing without the financial, military, and political support of the US. We can't do what they're doing without our vetoes in the UN. We must spread the word. We must challenge the current narratives. There is no justification for what is happening to the Palestinians in the occupied territory. If you are Jewish, speak to your community. If you are American, speak to your community. If you are Jewish American, speak to your Jewish American community. Make your voice heard. I'm sorry I talked over time. Thank you all for listening, and appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for that informative and emotional presentation. I think sometimes we do forget about the emotions and the humanity of people involved in this, and very clearly, this matters, and it was very clearly presented in your presentation. And thank you for your witness, and thanks for your testimony, and thanks for sharing it with everybody. Our next speaker, though, it's a little hard to shift gears after that, but our next speaker is going to be Yonatan Shapira. Unfortunately, I guess AWDAH, as being that it's 3 o'clock in the morning, just couldn't keep his eyes open and couldn't join us here I'm sure he would have had many things to add to your story and to your witness. But we will shift gears, and if people are ready to shift gears, our next speaker is going to be emotional as well. Yonatan Shapira is a former Israeli captain and Air Force pilot. He was one of the organizers of a 2003 letter signed by 27 Air Force pilots who refused to participate in Israeli military operations against Palestinians. Shapira has also signed on to the internal Israeli movement for boycott, divestment, and sanctions that ZAKI referred to earlier, known as boycott from within. And Yonatan's witness is from the standpoint of a member of the Israeli Defense Forces, the Air Force. And so look forward to hearing his presentation. And again, thank you again, Bob, for your testimony and for your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. So good evening to everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak here. Thank you, Madeleine. Thank you, ZAKI, and thank you, Bob. And for everyone that are listening to us now. I'll just add something to what Bob was just saying, and I'm sure Bob will agree with me. All these horrific things that we heard about what the settlers and the military is doing somehow can reflect on the rest of the Israeli society, on the rest of official Israel within the 1967 borders, as over there it's just. The difference is that the ethnic cleansing of the rest of Palestine happened in 48 and in 67, and the brutality of the settlers today is a glimpse of the brutality of the Nakba that happened in 48, where, just to remind people, about 800,000 Palestinians were sent to exile, and 400 to 500 villages, towns, and Palestinian communities were destroyed. That when the Palestinian refugees, we started to hear about that, but I didn't hear about all these things when I when I was growing up in Israel as a naive Zionist boy. And although it's 3 o'clock where I am now, I feel that it's my duty, just as I felt maybe wrongly as a young boy and listening to the Israeli military. Today, I feel that my duty is to speak to whoever wants to listen, whoever has the patience to listen to my message, to me and my friends who are trying to do whatever we can to correct this distorted vision of what's going on in that area in the world. Every Palestinian can explain the situation in Palestine way better than me. I think the reason I'm here talking to you is because I basically shift sides. I was on the other side. I was, if you would meet me 20-something years ago and ask me about what we just heard, I would be kind of the apologetic Zionist lefty guy that would say, no, it's just a minority. We are striving for peace and all this nonsense that, especially in America and lots of Jewish communities around the world, we hear. I was that person. I was that person that when in an argument with someone about the occupation, and I still remember how a good friend of mine from Germany called me during the beginning of the Second Intifada, while I was already starting to shift my perception, but I was still on the defense. and she told me that her friends came back from Gaza, volunteering in hospitals, in Shifa Hospital and other places, seeing horrific things that happened to children and bombardment of civilians. And I remember how I shouted at her, "How dare you, a German woman, preach to me, an Israeli pilot, a great grandson of Holocaust victims and everything." So I was definitely on the other side. Even though I saw myself as this lefty, peace-loving guy, I was exactly the representation of the problem. Sometimes I want to tell people that it's not necessarily these radical Nazi settlers. It's those on the Zionist left that are bettering the image all the time, writing beautiful novels that are successfully around the world. Amos Oz and other people. This kind of apologetic attitude is the fact what enabled the Israeli apartheid to go for so many years. So if I have a few minutes, I can just describe quickly the process I went through from an obedient pilot to a supporter of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and a solidarity activist, because the way I see it today, it's not about us Israelis bettering Israel, making it just. No, it's joining the Palestinian struggle of liberation. As, okay, we were on the other side, but now we are part of the Palestinian struggle for liberation, bringing justice to all the people there. And it's a very big difference than the way even I used to think just 18 years ago, when I, with my friends, wrote the pilot's letter and refused to continue to be in the Air Force. Back then, we still thought that we will refuse and we will fix the Israeli society from inside. No, we are joining the Palestinian struggle for freedom, justice, and liberation. And we are doing it for everyone. We're doing it also for our own families, for our own people, for the Jewish community that lives there. But we are struggling for justice and for the liberation of millions of people. My process of becoming aware of the reality was along sometime in the years of the Second Intifada, 2001, 2002, especially when the Air Force started to shoot missiles into heavy populated areas. I was flying a rescue helicopter, so I didn't have to shoot or drop bombs myself, but nevertheless, I was part of these operations as a rescue pilot, as bringing soldiers with a Black Hawk helicopter, another toy that we get for free from the US taxpayer. In 2002, especially after an assassination of Salah Shehadeh, was the leader of the armed branch of the Hamas in Gaza. In the middle of the night, the 22nd of July, a 1 ton, like 2,000-pound bomb was dropped in the middle of the night on the house of Salah Shehadeh, of course, killing him, but also about 15 other people, mostly children and some babies in their mother's womb. Instead of the 3 floors building, what left was a big hole in the ground, and about 150 other people were severely maimed and remained blind and burned for the rest of their life. After this bombardment, although again I didn't have to participate in all these things, I saw it as an observer, as a citizen. I read about it in the news. I talked to friends that were from that squadron. To me, it was like the last piece of puzzle that fell down and allowed me to see the big picture. In a way, I used to say that among the other children that were killed, back in that bombardment was this naive Zionist boy that I used to be. And after that, I decided to start organizing other pilots in the Air Force that feel the same. It wasn't an easy process because I didn't want it to be revealed. I had to keep it secret and to make sure that we are fishing the right people without exposing our initiative. It was a process that took a long time, many months. At the end, we talked to about 100 Air Force pilots from all different squadrons in the Air Force, including former commanders and commander of the Air Force and very high ranks. Just the minority of this group was brave enough or were willing to sign the letter, but the rest kept it secretly, including a former Air Force commander that already passed away since then. But when we finally published it in the eve of Rosh Hashanah of the new Jewish year in 2003, it was clear to the Air Force and to the Israeli military and to the Israeli government that we are representing just the tip of some big iceberg that is laying under the surface. That basically changed my life completely. I was eventually fired from all civilian companies that I was working in, what brought me eventually to work in the US and now in Europe as well. But nevertheless, I realized that one of the most important things that I have to do is keep questioning myself. If back then I was actually a member of a terrorist organization, the way I see it now, but I still thought about myself as a peace-loving guy, maybe today also I'm not aware of something. And that kind of led me to a process of realizing, trying to realize again and again the reality in which I live in. Understanding that no, it's not only that occupation of 1967, it's the Nakba of 1948. It's not only the Israeli military brutality, it's the big military industrial complex. It's much more. I'm just a little grain in this big scheme of where the power that be takes more to themselves and those in the bottom would get nothing. So it's a long process of realization. During this process, one important step was to realize that it's not enough just to say no, to refuse. Yes, I refused. It's very good to refuse. It's important not to go to the military. It's important to refuse to be part of illegal apartheid and military operations. It's good to refuse to all these things, but what do you say yes to? And in that moment, we started reaching out to Palestinians that were activists on the Palestinian side. Most of them were former fighters in the first Intifada and some in the second Intifada. That led to the creation of an organization called the Combatants for Peace. We were both fighters trying to kill each other and then starting to work together towards the end of the occupation non-violently. It was an important thing for my personal growth, for my expansion of my identity, of course. But nevertheless, I realized that I also create a little bit a problem by participating in something like that, that even if you don't think like that, it creates this fake equilibrium that there are two sides here fighting against each other. We are both refusing to be violent, and now we hold hands and struggle together for peace. In its essence, there is a problem because it's not two sides fighting for a piece of land. It's an apartheid regime that is engaged in ethnic cleansing on a daily basis. And if I want to do something worthwhile, I need to join that side and not to create some fake balance picture. But during those years, I helped found Breaking the Silence and help them initiate and bring their important message. But to me, it was not enough anymore. And that's when, together with other activists, we started the Boycott from Within, which is basically Israeli citizens supporting the Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Let's just remember the goals of the BDS movement. It's calling for the end of the occupation, of course, the end of the apartheid, and the right of return for Palestinian refugees to historic Palestine. And it's a big, big shift for someone that came from the Zionist left and thought we will just fix it and then divide it and live two countries side by side. I long ago don't see it like that. I think the two-state solution is actually the two states problem, and we have to get over that that view. How much time do I have more? Because I see that I took a little longer than I thought. Can you hear me, Madeline?
You have 5 more minutes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
good.
I want to go forward. The siege on Gaza started 2007, already 14 years ago. Basically, we didn't mention that, but with all the situation in Palestine and the occupation and the apartheid, there is also a big ghetto that is locked, an open-air prison with more than 2 million people, half of them, about 1 million children, that most of them were born after the ghetto was sealed. So most of the kids in Gaza were never able to go outside of this confined small strip of land. Israel is continuously bombing them from the air, from the sea, and from the ground, and periodically go inside. The last brutal operation was just last May, where Israel started taking down a skyscraper, like big buildings that were leveled down, with a very sophisticated operation of shooting them from the air with all these machines that we get for free from the US, with missiles coming from different directions at the same time, with an operation that I heard some pilots on the news taking pride how it was so sophisticatedly planned and exact in order to only destroy that building. And what is that building? A civilian building where, you know, so many people living, and of course, everyone saw what happened there. These are war crimes in a level that I would feel more comfortable now to say acts of genocide. When a country is attacking in that way, defenseless population that cannot escape anywhere. It's not that they can go into a shelter or go and run away like when Israel bombed Lebanon. They would tell everyone to go north of this latitude or whatever. They are locked in a very small area where they have nowhere to go, and they are being bombarded day and night with these bombs. When I woke up with that 1-ton bomb in 2002 that was thrown on a house in Gaza, it was one bomb in one night. That was 2002. In 2014, just for example, in one night, at the same day, the 22nd of July, Israel dropped 100 1-ton bombs in Rafah, the south part of Gaza, killing dozens and dozens of people. So the brutality is not stagnant. It's becoming more and more as we speak. In one specific case, there was, maybe people here remember, in 2010, there was a Solidarity Free Gaza flotilla of boats from different countries coming to try to break the siege, to symbolically at least break the illegal naval blockade on Gaza. It was 2002 in the summer. One of the boats was actually like a big ferry with hundreds of activists, the Mavi Marmara, with a Turkish flag. Israel dropped soldiers in the middle of the night on the boat and massacred 11 activists. Some of them are point blank with a bullet in the middle of the head, as if their picture and their identity was planned in advance. To me, it was another wake-up call. I was used to being accused by people that were with me in the Air Force that why do you refuse? You know, no one asked you ever to bomb anyone. You're just a rescue pilot. And then, of course, I would say it doesn't matter if I fly the F-16 or I just sit in the back or I just fly the helicopter nearby. I am responsible of what happened in this organization, even if I'm not the one that actually dropped the bomb. Everyone can say, no, it's not me, it's my commander. In that specific case of the Mavi Marmara, a Black Hawk squadron brought these Navy SEALs, pirates, to the boat. And that was the same squadron that 7 years before I still used to serve in. So after that, it was clear to me that I have to participate and take part in the next flotilla. We were going about 3 months later with a Jewish boat from Greece, and eventually with the Jewish activists, 10 of us. One of us was a Holocaust survivor, another one a rabbi, and other activists from Israel and the US and Europe. We tried to, again, symbolically break the blockade. We were met with brutal soldiers that shot us and tasered us in different places in our bodies. If we were Palestinian fishermen or even Turk activists, like on the Mavi Marmara, we would be killed to death, but shot to death. But since we were Jewish, I guess we got the better treatment of just getting tasered. Since then, there were several other attempts to break the siege. I will not tell you about all of them, but to me, the bottom line here is even the boycott that is considered the most radical thing to support now, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, even this is not enough. When acts of genocide are happening in that scale, when the apartheid continues and more massacres are to come, what we call today is intervention. Intervention in order to help save the life of a population that is being ethnically cleansed. So I am a nonviolent activist. I put down my weapon long ago, and I'm in solidarity with the Palestinian struggle. But I'm not criticizing those who are protecting their land and those who are protecting their people. When I grew up in Israel, learning about the Warsaw Rebellion, they didn't talk about nonviolence in the Warsaw resistance. So I, as an activist, as a former military person, I support and participate in the nonviolent struggle. But again, we are calling for intervention because people are being massacred, and we have to stop this massacre in any possible way. I want to say again that the major shift that I went through, and I expect people to be aware of and to consider, is that now we have to switch sides. It's not anymore, let's talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, how peace can flourish in the land. No, we need to move to the side of the oppressed and in solidarity with them, struggle against these acts of violence. That's the bottom line of my message. And again, thank you so much for inviting me here. For those of you that do not agree with what I said, thank you, especially to you, that you listen. And thanks again. And I hope I'll make it to my exam tomorrow morning because it's 3:10. And sorry for the overtime.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much. Your honesty and authenticity and discussion of the changes that occurred within your mind and your heart together are very strong messages for us all, and messages that our media don't usually communicate to us. The messages we get are more of the two sides of a conflict. And I'm not going to say very much at this point because of time, but I went through something similar when I was on the West Bank in 2013, and it left me with a feeling of like a steel-like conviction inside that what we've been told is wrong, what the mainstream media say about what's going on is wrong, and that we need to take a side. And I think that message came through loudly and clearly. And I want to invite Hafsa Habe to speak, to add. She was going to make a comment, but we've asked her to add a little bit more because she's talking about exactly what's going on in Palestine, the West Bank right now, with trying to displace an entire neighborhood, an entire community. So Hafsa, Hafsa is also a member of the New Jersey chapter of the American Muslims for Palestine. And I think what she has to say follows really well on what you just said, Jonathan. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to all the speakers. Can everybody hear me well?
Yes.
Sorry, my throat is a little bit sore. My name is Hafsa Habe. I'm here on behalf of American Muslims for Palestine, New Jersey chapter. At first, I was going to make a small statement. I've only added a little bit, so I hope I didn't get anybody's hopes up. American Muslims for Palestine upholds that inherent human rights for all people everywhere, and firmly stands against all forms of bigotry and racism. Specifically, the struggle for the inalienable rights for Palestinians is categorically opposed to all forms of racism, bigotry, including Islamophobia, anti-Black racism, anti-immigrants, anti-Semitism, and all other forms of bigotry directed particularly towards people of color and indigenous peoples everywhere. Earlier this year, we saw some action for Palestine when we heard about the expulsions of families from their homes in the village Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem. Now, the momentum we saw in May has since calmed down, as we can all tell. But you know what hasn't calmed down? We all can attest to this, is the occupation, the apartheid, and the expulsions of Palestinian people from their homes. So the UN released something recently that estimates that there are currently 970 Palestinians at risk for forced removal from their homes. Now, I want you to picture yourself in this situation. This is a situation that 4 different Palestinian families from Sheikh Jarrah are currently going through, and they were in 2 days ago exactly. Now, you were made a refugee in your own country in 1948. You moved to another village and your family built a house from the ground up. Not much later, that new village is illegally occupied by Israel. Fast forward through all the oppression and occupation you faced all this time, going to work, going to school, visiting family, and even getting your groceries, you've never felt safe. Now, Israeli settlers from America or from Europe come to steal your home in Palestine, and all they have to say for themselves is, if I don't steal it, then someone else will. Or You go to your daughter's graduation, but you can't focus on her because you're praying that a settler doesn't move into your home and take out all of your belongings while you're gone. Now, a few months later, which is the situation that we saw 2 days ago, you're in the highest court of your occupier, Israel's highest court, which is a Hebrew-only court, and you don't speak Hebrew, with no translators. Not to mention the fact that Israeli laws already shouldn't apply in an illegally occupied village. Anyways, they offer you a compromise where you can stay in your home, the home that your family built, your parents or your grandparents, by paying rent to an Israeli settler organization. Those are your only options. Now, you look at some of the media in America and you see Palestinians don't agree, or Palestinians turn down an offer by Israeli courts. Would any of you take that offer? I personally would not. Now, we know that the United States government is and has been active and complacent in war crimes against the indigenous people in many countries around the world, including this one. And its hand in war crimes committed against the indigenous Palestinian people extends far greater than complacency. Every year, Israel enjoys a check from the US government that it spends with total impunity. They use our tax dollars to murder, imprison, torture, bomb, occupy, humiliate, blockade, and violate the rights of Palestinians over and over again. American Muslims for Palestine condemns the funding of these violations of human rights and international law, and we call for an end on the military aid provided to Israel on a yearly basis. We also call for boycotts, divestments, and sanctions against Israel, and we call on companies throughout all America and throughout the nation, internationally, just as to pull out, we call on all companies to pull out of operating in the occupied Palestinian territories, as we've recently seen with Ben & Jerry's, and we want this to lead to ending operations in all of historic Palestine, rather than just stopping halfway. We won't settle for performative activism anymore by these large companies or hypocritical representatives. We believe that Palestinians have a right to safety, security, and happiness, and it's our responsibility and our duty to fight for those rights. Sorry, I couldn't add too much, but that is the end. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Hafsa. I think, you know, what you said was right on the mark and added very nicely to what we've heard. I want to make a quick sidestep a little to allow Don Fitz, outreach coordinator for the Green Party of St. Louis, to make a quick announcement. And then we have Ahmed Al-Tuni, if he's here, to make another comment about another strong action to address the issue of boycott and apartheid.
If I don't, I'm sorry to disturb, but I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to get up soon for some tests, so it's almost 3:30. So I'll say goodbye and sorry for my departure. But thanks again for inviting me, and good luck with the rest of the meeting.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. So much. Good night and good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
Or later today, I should say. Don?
Okay. I want to thank Jonathan for coming on and everybody else who's spoken. I am John Fitz with the Green Party of St. Louis. Help work with SUBERI to put together the program. I want to say that the Green Party of St. Louis has been doing programs like this for over 20 years. Before COVID, they were in person, but with COVID, we've started doing them by Zoom. We are going to be doing a couple of programs at the end of the year around the topic alternatives to corporate contamination of food. Now, I think this will be a very important program, and I hope people keep an eye out for it, because while we're all horrified at the things that happen to Palestinians and all the bombing and murder that goes on, keep in mind that probably more people in the world die because of contamination of food, because of starvation, because of all of the things connected with food than actually die in war and bombings and shellings. And so we really hope that you can come back towards the end of the year and participate in the programs that we're going to have on contamination of food. And if you have some ideas about what you would like to see included, please send us an email. You'll be getting information from the Green Party of St. Louis, a recording, so you can always respond to that and say, hey, why don't you do this in the program on contamination of food? Okay, so thanks a lot, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you, Don. And now comes the commentary portion. I'm looking for Ahmed Al-Tuni, who's a member of the Green Party of the United States. I don't see him right now, but I will come back as soon as he comes. I saw him here about 5 minutes ago, so I hope he'll return. So going forward from that, what we have is a group of people who are speaking on behalf of co-sponsors for this event. And each person has 2 minutes. The first person up, are you Ahmed? On the phone there? No, I don't think so. All right, our first person up after Ahmed Al-Tuni is Akile Anai, the African People's Socialist Party.
Uhuru, this is Akile. I just want to thank you, Madeline, and also just thank the Green Party of St. Louis for inviting the African People's Socialist Party to participate by way of co-sponsoring this event. And I just really want to appreciate the presentations that have come, before these comments up to now. I am representing the African People's Socialist Party. I'm the Director of Agitation and Propaganda for this party. It is an international revolutionary anti-colonial organization that it was founded and led by Chairman Amalia Shatella. And what we hope to contribute to this discussion tonight is the theory of African internationalism, which is the theory that guides the work of our party and is the worldview of the African working class to help to define what it is that we see happening in Palestine as it relates to the rest of the world. And as it relates to the theme, resisting Israel's attack on Palestine, we feel it's important to say that the initial attack that Palestine has come under was the attack. Palestine came under attack before there was an Israel, that Israel exists as a consequence of the attack that was made on Palestine. And that's important to note. This isn't a holy war. This is colonialism that the people of Palestine are confronted with. And this is important to draw out because the situation that we are seeing is not a consequence of two pre-existing entities suddenly falling out and Israel being the mighty military aggressor. This is just like the United States, just like Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. This is a case of settler colonialism. And settler colonialism is this illegitimate imposition of foreign power, foreign domination over a people on their own land. And it's distinguishable from colonialism as we know it, where colonialism as we understand it is where foreign and alien domination of a people happens when the alien leaves their land, goes to another land, attacks that land and the people and extracts value from that land. But in the way of settler colonialism, it's where foreigners go to the land, they attack that land, they settle on the land to benefit themselves. And colonialism became the way that Europeans in Europe recognized its ability to save itself from the desperate conditions of poverty and despair. Colonialism became the way that would happen, and it was what Europe did to the entire world. And when we have the situation of settler colonialism in Palestine, it emerged even this colonial state that now protects the existence of the settler colonizers in Palestine, which is what we see throughout the world. And it's really important for us to understand this because Israel didn't just come into the picture and is this isolated entity that functions with US intervention militarily or something, but it's a part of this global colonial capitalist system that the birth of colonialism, birthed a world economy, a system built on extracting the resources of colonized people. And that's the context to which Israel exists. And so when we see the US intervening militarily, when we see the US participating in the cover-up and covering up what it is that they're doing in Israel in the first place, what we're seeing is a process of Israel being an essential strategic component of US imperialism, of the whole colonial capitalist project. And
Akile, I think you've hit 2 minutes.
2 minutes, oh, I'm sorry. Well, thank you for, yeah, thank you.
I hate to interrupt, but we have a number of other speakers and everyone needs to stick to the 2 minutes in order for everyone to get a turn. And what you said, Akile, was really spot on. Okay, next up is Attack the System, Keith Preston. Or someone else from Attack the System. All right, I'm going to move on. Pete Gleichman from the Green Party, Albuquerque metro area, please.
Yeah, I want 3 points. First, actually, I want to thank the presenters and the organizers of this. And then I want to emphasize the points. Number 1, Zionism is racism. 2, regarding the racist government of Israel and apartheid, the 1998 Rome Statute to the International Criminal Court and the 1973 International Convention on the Suppression and Punishment of the Crime of Apartheid define apartheid as a crime against humanity with 3 main elements. 1, the intent to maintain domination by one racial group over another. 2, a context of systematic oppression by one racial group over another. And 3, inhumane acts. Recently, Human Rights Watch has released a report after years of research concluding that Israel is guilty of apartheid, that is, a crime against humanity. The third point I think that should be emphasized is that the perception of many Palestinians and many Arabs is that, yes, Israel is the oppressor, but that Israel is the spearhead or pit bull for US imperialism. That's the perception, and the perception is reality, and that's a reality that we should be making clear to elected leaders in America. Thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize to anyone who feels that they didn't have enough time. We're trying to keep to a strict 2-minute time period. And Christina, can you make sure that people know when their 2 minutes are up? Is there anybody here from the Green Party of Florida or the Green Party of Onondaga County?
Madeline, can I ask a question? Is
Sure.
everybody hearing the bell that means time is up?
No, okay. Okay, if we have time, I will come back to people like Akile. It's not no intent to cut people off at all. So if we have time, we can come back to her. But people aren't hearing you, so we need to do something else.
Is anybody hearing the sound?
Now we are.
I heard it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so next up, thank you, Christina. Green Party of Virginia, Blazin Bloom. Hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yes, Blazin.
Blazin, okay.
I'm the co-chair of the Green Party of Virginia, and I can say for certain that we are staunchly opposed to the apartheid of the Israeli state, the illegal apartheid and oppression of the Palestinian people, which violates international law. And I can also say for certain that we oppose the Virginia Israeli Advisory Board, which I believe is the only one in the nation in which supports Israeli businesses here and abroad. And we condemn that, and we will do everything in our power to fight Israeli oppression in our state and in our nation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Is there anyone here from the Green Party of Yavapai County?
Yes, thank you, Madam. It's me, Hurry-Aksha Bubba.
Okay,
Thank you all, St. Louis. Can you hear me okay?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you. And my comment is just a simple statement of oneness. I learned it from the trainers at our Green Party annual national meeting last month. And it's a quotation from Lilla Watson, an Aboriginal rights activist from Queensland, Australia. Okay, it goes like this. Your liberation is bound up with mine. Let us work together. And I mean to reinforce all these wonderful messages we heard from the featured speakers. All right, thank you, and over.
I thank you. I'm going to invite, we have a couple of panelists still here. Is there anyone who does, Robert or Bob SUBERI, did you want to respond to anything you've heard so far?
No, only that I agree wholeheartedly with everything everyone said, and I too went through the same transition that Yonatan did. It happened to me much later in life.
All right, thank you. So we'll continue on. Green Social Thought, Kim Sipes or Sipes?
Yes, it's Sipes. Thank
Sipes.
you. Okay. I want to thank everybody involved in this. This has been marvelous. I especially strong support for Bob SUBERI and Yonatan, as I too am a U.S. military veteran. I was a former sergeant in the Marine Corps, serving between 1969 and 73, and fortunately not going to Vietnam, and while turning around while in the military. I understand the process. But I want to talk about something else, and that is I want to push us further than just an anti-colonial statement, which I think is correct, moving in the correct direction. But I want to argue that we need to think of the United States on two levels. One, as a country, which is how most of us do, but on the other hand, as the center of the U.S. empire. And that this is what ties the oppression in Palestine, in the Philippines, and South Africa, is that the U.S. is an empire. We are stealing our resources that are designed for our country and using them to oppress people around the world. And I think we need to fight for an aberration of the $750 billion the U.S. spends every year to protect its empire. So thank you, and I appreciate all the good work tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you. ZAKI, did you want to make a comment as one of the panelists?
I just wanted to reemphasize the points already made, that Israel exists really through our tax dollars in terms of, as I had made mention earlier, the type of foreign aid and the military aid that it receives. And it is just a extension of the colonialism personified by the United States. And if we are true to wanting to end the misery of humanity across the globe, then we need to always like to use the example of the movie of Dracula, that we have to drive a stake through the heart of capitalism, colonialism, and imperialism. And that means the downfall or the revolutionary transformation of this government. So on that note, death to capitalism, death to imperialism, and death to colonialism.
Thank you. Kansas Green Party, Nick Blessing.
Hi, thank you. I'd just like to, on behalf of the Kansas Green Party, thank all the speakers and everybody else for putting on this event. I think it is so important to have events like this and talk about this very important issue, considering all the misinformation and all the misconceptions there are about Israel and Palestine. Even I'm someone who just, I was just a student in law school that I just completed recently. And even in a place like law school, you know, so many people don't even know about this issue, or, you know, are completely ignorant about it. And there's so many people that believe that just speaking out against atrocities against an oppressed people is somehow anti-Semitism, you know, and all that. So I'm just very appreciative to be able to participate in this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lynn Stewart Organization, Ralph Pointer? Or anyone else from the Lynn Stewart Organization? I'm still holding Akile to bring back when everyone is done. Don't despair. Anyone here from the Massachusetts Green Rainbow Party? Okay, and next would be Aza Rojbi from Mobilization Against War and Occupation in Vancouver.
Thank you. Hi, can you hear me, Madeline?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks to you and to the Missouri Green Party and all the other organizing and endorsers for this important webinar. I'm bringing you solidarity and greetings from Mobilization Against War and Occupation in Vancouver, Canada. I have to say that today's presentations were very educational and powerful. So thank you for bringing us all together. The 8 witness testimony that Bob gave us a bit of a glimpse of the suffering and the hardships that Palestinians have to live on a daily basis under the Israeli occupation. So thank you for sharing that. This violence and genocidal policies of Israel are funded and supported by the United States government, their other imperialist allies, but also the government of Canada here right across the borders. And as a lot of the speakers before me said, the Israeli occupation and Israel would not last a day, would not be able to exist a day without the massive diplomatic, financial, and military support of the United States. Just as an example, I'm sure some of you might know, but during the latest assault on Gaza, the US Biden administration approved $735 million of weapon sales to Israel. And I wanted to also quickly add that in the face of this ethnic cleansing and merciless attacks that the people of Palestine go through on a daily basis, they continue to fight for their rights to land, their right to self-determination, and their right to return to their land. And no amount of violence by the state of Israel has ever been able to change that. And it was very powerful to hear to the testimonies of Bob. And thank you for sharing your stories and sharing through them the courage, humanity, and resistance that you witnessed in the Palestinian villages. I wanted to wrap up by echoing what the speakers before me said, is that we need to stand up and be consistent and active in our ongoing fight in solidarity with Palestine and for the liberation of Palestine. Here in Vancouver, Canada, with Mobilization Against War and Occupation, we hope that we can work together across borders more to campaign, challenge the Zionist narratives, and also hold the governments of Canada and the United States accountable for their complicities in the Israelis' atrocities. And Viva Palestina, self-determination for Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have a few more speakers here. Is there anyone here from the new abolitionist movement? Betty Davis? No. From the North Carolina Green Party, Tommy James or Jan Martell? St. Louis Friends of Bethlehem, I know that you were having microphone problems. Do you have a telephone you can use? They still here? All right. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement, Holly Murray?
Haru, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hey everyone, I just really, first off, really deeply appreciate all the speakers tonight. It's been such a powerful event. My name is Hallie Murray. I'm representing the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. We stand in unconditional solidarity with the liberation of Palestinian people in their heroic struggle to regain their stolen land and freedom from the illegitimate settler colonial Israeli state. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement is an organization of white people working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, organizing for reparations within the white community. And I really want to salute our leadership, Chairman Omalia Shatella, who's present on this call tonight, and salute Director Akile for her statement earlier. And just victory to Palestinian people, reparations to African people, reparations now, Uhuru.
Thank you. Other groups that were listed here, but I'm not sure are here, but let me read out the names just in case, and then we can follow up with Akile to finish up her statement from before. The Wisconsin Green Party, Jonathan Kingfisher.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Joe Nathan.
Joe Nathan, my bad. I apologize.
It's all good. I would like to ask about comparison of terms, occupation, illegal settlement, settler, and settler colonialization, with particular consideration of state theocracy in regard to land theft. And I think Kile did a great job of addressing those terms, but the power of words and the emotional impact of words sort of in America, settlers and covered wagons in Flagstaff, Arizona. It's very popular to have covered wagons out in the front lawn with flower boxes, and it's kind of a reminiscent sort of thing that a lot of people just don't have an emotional identification or connection to. It's something of romanticized history. And then occupation is another word that I had recently heard that Israeli wanted to cease using that, to say they're not the occupation. Certainly in America, people would not want to say popularly that America is an occupation. It's assumed that it is the establishment when we may have illegal settlements here. There was one example in America where Menominee County was given back to reservation status, given back to Native American Indian control. So particularly the terms settler and occupation are sort of things that have different emotional associations and impact. So if anybody wants to respond to those thoughts, I appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to ask our speakers, our panelists, if anyone has something they want to say in response to that. Thank you. Joe Nathan.
Yeah, I'll respond. You know, in terms of the occupation and settlers, the reality is that Europeans came here, as I had said earlier, and they committed genocide against Native Americans. And so they are, illegal occupants of this land. And in terms of the romanticizing of the settlers, it just speaks to how people are misguided in terms of understanding history. So So, I mean, that would be my basic response to his question.
Okay, Bob, you have anything to add?
The only thing I would add is that, in 1862, we had the Homestead Act, and the settlers came into land that was now Indian territory in the United States. That's where they were pushed to from the East Coast. And the government used any conflict between the Indians and those settlers, which was clearly aggressive, occupying their land, to come in and massacre the Indians. And that was their intention, literally, to massacre the Indians, to exterminate them. It's the same technique that's happening in the West Bank right now, where settlers go in, they create problems, and they're just anticipating, hoping they'll get a reaction from the Palestinians so that they can come in and wipe them out.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. I have two more speakers and Akile still. And the first speaker, I think, is there someone from the Illinois Green Party that wants to say something?
Hi.
Okay.
My name is Anna Schiefelbein. I'm an organizer with the Illinois Green Party. We have a Green Party series with live streams every Monday night. So if anybody wants a plug, come email volunteer@ilgp.org, and I'll drop the email in there. We want to talk about green issues. We also have action networks. We can do petitions and letter campaigns. So bring me language that's easy for me to get it out there. We can get language from the team too. So I think that I think print media would also be really good for this, with personal stories, and then people can read them and understand what it's like. So, but do like us on Facebook and YouTube. We will have Charlotte Burnett. She's a Michigan Green Party person, and she was working in Palestine, and so she's going to share her experiences on Monday, the 16th of August. So I would love to connect with people and move forward together on this. Thank you.
No, thank you. And Ayman Fadl, I know you've written a comment in the chat. Do you want to leave that standing, or do you want to ask a question or make a short comment verbally as well?
I do want to make another comment. My name is Ayman Fadl. I'm from the Georgia Green Party. I think that we should also, when we are bringing up the issue of USA policy towards Palestine, we shouldn't forget that it's also part of a regional context of support to dictatorships like Egypt, dictatorships like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and these nations are causing, or these governments are causing awful harm in a lot of places in the world. And so that I think it's an effective package deal to bring them all together about when we're talking about USA foreign policy. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, thank you.
Thanks to the speakers. They were very good, and thanks for the organizers.
Oh, no, thank you. Those last words are really important. It's an Israeli US agenda for many places in the Middle East, and the sooner that we see everything as connected and not a series of locations in conflict, I think the sooner we'll be able to resist effectively. All right, I think I wanted to add here, because I know Ahmed Al-Tuni was going to talk about the resistance to this, to the docking of a ship from Israel, and I'm not sure where he is at this moment, but I think I will ask that when we upload this, that we put a link, at least put a link to the information about that particular fight, because I know there was one action here in New Jersey at very early in the morning And I think this is another effective way of combating or fighting off the apartheid nature of the Israeli state. And so, okay, I think we should add that, even if we don't have the good fortune of having Ahmed here to talk about it as a member of the Green Party USA. We also are having someone phoning in right now. Lee, are you in? Are you able to speak right now? While we're waiting for Lee to come in, I'm going to ask Akile to finish her statement. Oh, there, here we have.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, thank
I'm
you,
here.
Lee. Perfect, perfect timing. Perfect timing.
Okay.
Go ahead. And you are with, please identify the group you're with.
St. Louis Friends of Bethlehem.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
and okay, I'm sorry, I've been having computer issues. You know, Bob SUBERI mentioned the community center library at Aher that AWDAH, HATHALEEN, and he have generated. It's a noble effort, and it fits in well with the mission of St. Louis Friends of Bethlehem, which is to foster artistic, scientific, and educational endeavors. And donations to the library can be made securely by credit card on our website. And it's I saw it in the chat box. I think Bob put it in there. But St. Louis Friends of Bethlehem was started in 2018 after my delegation to Palestine. I came back to St. Louis and joined with like-minded folks, and we formed St. Louis Friends of Bethlehem. And now that I know what I know, I cannot unknow it. I will do whatever it is that I can do to redress the injustices suffered by the Palestinian people. I met Bob SUBERI while hosting a Voices from the Holy Land film screening and discussion of documentaries about the lives of people actually living in the Holy Land. And since the beginning of the pandemic, the salon has been online. So I think there's a link in the chat for our website.
Yes.
So
yes, there is.
it's okay. Great. So it's time to register. The flyers just came out for the August film, and the discussion is going to be on the 15th. But you watch the film ahead of time, and then you can partake of the discussions. Yeah, they're all documentaries, and they're all very good. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad you kept struggling to get in and deliver this important message. And so, before I ask Akile and I to finish her statement, was there anyone else that had some question or a quick statement that I didn't call on, or Jim? Okay. But it's limited to 2 minutes, please, and we still have time. We'll still have time for.
Thank you so much, Madeline. I'm trying to share the campaign, the very active campaign from Virginia Coalition for Human Rights. We are trying to expose the influence of the Institute for Curricular Services, which is an arm of Brand Israel, to rewrite our history books. They have already affected 11,000 changes in U.S. textbooks. And we're working with the Texas Coalition for Human Rights as well. We have a document about the influence of the Israeli lobby in U.S. government by Grant Smith. And all of those resources are outlined on our website, Virginia Coalition for Human Rights, VCHR. They have instituted 22 interjects projects to install solar, taking grants from tobacco, for example, and using inferior materials in Virginia. And we're, as our wonderful speaker from the Virginia Greens pointed out, the only state in the United States that has an official government presence of a foreign country, the Virginia Israel Advisory Board, which is supported by Virginia taxpayers. So we consider this a model for the nation we recognize that Israel is using Virginia as a petri dish to establish a model for the nation and taking over politics, education, and our economy. And it's insidious and it's deadly, it's poisonous, and the whole technique is invisibility. So I invite everyone to look at our website. We presented the $735 million petition to our both of our senators, Senator Kane and Warner, on the 14th this month, and I led delegations to their offices. And we have one supporter, by the way, for Betty McCollum's 2590 from Virginia. And I hope.
Please, I'm sorry, Jim.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry. If you want to post whatever you need to post in the chat, that would be helpful. I appreciate that.
All right.
Okay, thank you. And then I saw there's a question from Rick Sprout, and I saw also Ralph Pointer here. I'd called on him earlier. He wasn't available to speak. So Rick Sprout first.
Hi, yeah, I'm from the Broome-Tioga Greens in upstate New York. And I just want to point out that in the great play by Bertolt Brecht, the last line that Galileo says is, "and yet it moves." And I think that's really important. The reason I'm saying that is that I've been involved. I tell my daughter I'm an old man with a good memory. I was involved early on with SNCC, which was one of the first Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which not only were the first group that encouraged draft resistance, but they were also pro-Palestinian. I've been in events over my 50 plus years where there would be 2 or 3 of us, if that, and we'd be thrown out of buildings, banned from things. That's all changing now, and it's changing for the better. And it's changing because there are organizations and papers like If Americans Knew by Alison Weir, it's Jewish Voices for Peace, it's Jewish Currents, and a lot of other magazines. I think it's really important to understand, as one of the brothers said, we're in the belly of the beast, we're in the empire. And the only way that any of this will change ever is if we change the system in the United States from root to branch, as we used to say. So at any event like this, in Binghamton, we brought in, Norman Finkelstein, who was an undergraduate here. We brought in Palestinian women's cooperatives. We brought in refuseniks. We've shared stories of the anti-war GI movement in the United States. We had a huge demonstration organized in 2 days with over 200 people. And it was the first time where the Zionists had to hide under a tree. Not that we were going to beat them up, but they were so outnumbered that they couldn't stop us. And I think it's really important not just to be going on tours of countries, but to bring the people here and to build the solidarity from below. And then also
I think that's your 2 minutes, Rick.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Because I've been very, we've had.
No. That's
Okay.
fine.
Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else?
Well, Ralph Pointer, I'm here.
There you go. I'm sorry. Of course.
How are you? I'm
I'm
so
fine.
sorry that I'm late. And it's Clark Kissinger of SDS once said, "The price of freedom is constant meetings." And I'd like to change that to constant demonstrations. And demonstrations, we just got in, we slipped up. We would have been on this one had we kept our notes straight. We were working with the burial ground there, about to plow under another African burial ground for housing. And that's another story. But on Palestine, about 10 years ago, up in Boston, Ward Churchill, who was the head of the history department at the University of Colorado in Boulder, when he made the statement in 9/11 that there were no innocents in the World Trade Center. And they fired him for that. And that is another story. But I'm getting to the story that he gave a talk in Boston And what he said, if you want to understand Palestine, look at the plight of the American Indian and the indigenous people. Step by step, he broke it down. Exactly what happened to the indigenous people here was happening in Palestine. And I never forgot that speech, his presentation. And so I would encourage everybody, you want to see what they have in mind for Palestine, look and see what they did to the indigenous here. And if you follow it step by step, look up Ward Churchill, any of the books he's written, and he expresses it. So we are in trouble. And everything, I don't want to repeat anything that anyone said, but all of these issues are so true. But I forget which slaveholder said, it was Jefferson, I believe, that the truth must not only be the truth, it must be told in a way that people can understand. And the truth told in a way that people can understand must be believed. We must spread the truth. I didn't tell you, I'm Ralph Pointer, Franklin County Green Party. I'm in Brooklyn, I'm in New York. Yes, we must get the truth out. And as the gentleman before me spoke, we are gaining. And we must gain quicker, or there will be no Palestinians. Because I hear that Finkelstein was mentioned. And one of the things he said,
I'm sorry,
in the literature, they're denying that there ever was a Palestine. And yeah, so we have a lot of ground to cover, and I'm thankful to be with good people, progressive people who understand and are willing to do something about it. Thank you for having me. See you at the next meeting.
and thank you so much. I think that was a perfect ending to our program. You kind of wrapped it up and summed it up. I think this is a good time, to end, unless I'm looking at Bob there. Did you have something else you wanted to add?
Talk to me.
Yes.
Oh.
I see you on screen. I thought you were. If you don't, you don't. I think.
I will say one thing. I had a meeting yesterday with a woman from the JCRC, which is kind of a, conservative, liberal, I don't know, Jewish organization. And basically what she said to me, my question to her is, why don't you talk about Palestine? They talk about Black Lives Matter. They talk about voting rights. They talk about immigration rights. They'll never mention Palestine. And I asked her why. And she says, well, we get our funding from, the Jewish Federation, and they don't allow it. And they get letters. The Jewish Federation gets letters if I say anything that even hints at Palestinian existence. So she said, what you need to do, what she told me was what Franklin Roosevelt told the country. They said, make me do it. Write letters, send me emails. When we have programs, make comments. She says, make me do it. Let me know so that I can let the Jewish Federation know that there's a constituency out there that doesn't agree with what we're doing. So that's really important. And we're all afraid to do it.
Thank you, Bob. And I did promise Akile that she could finish up her statement, but only for like another minute, I hope. I probably cut you off a little bit prematurely. Can you finish? Would you be able to finish up?
Yeah, I just appreciate the opportunity. And I want to say that, the only way to end the attacks on Palestine is to rid Palestine of Israel, to rid Palestine of its parasite. What we understand, this colonial relationship of colonizer and colonized. There is no two-state agreement or a resolution that can be made where there is a solution that a colonizer and a colonized can have equally. That the attack on Palestine is the existence of Israel. And in order for the attacks to cease, that Palestine has to be free of Israel, has to be free of colonialism. And Israel is a part of a global colonial capitalist system, which means that it's participating in the same system that we know the US imperialism as a whole is partaking in, and that US imperialism, this global colonial capitalist system, can be fought wherever it is that we are located. So when we ask how, to intervene and resist Israel's attacks on Palestine, we do it right here in the belly of the beast. And we do it by, standing in solidarity with the African Revolution, the Black Power movement here in this country. That's where the same attacks that are happening to the people of Palestine are mirroring the attacks that happen to African people, indigenous people on their land. That you want to end colonialism in Palestine, you want to end colonialism right here in the US, and that has to be the task that we all unite to take. And that's why understanding the question of Palestine as a question of suffering under colonial domination, and that there cannot be a solution where the colonizer and colonized are equal, but the colonizer has to go. We say death to colonialism, free Palestine for the African Revolution, Uhuru, which is Swahili for freedom. Uhuru, thank you.
Oh, thank you, and thank you to everyone who participated in this and put up with some of the time checks that we needed to impose. Everyone had a chance to speak. I believe that this seminar or webinar rather will be published in a couple of days, and everyone will get a link, an email explaining where it is and that it exists. And in the spirit of what everybody has been saying, I ask that people take the link and share it. And I mean, I saw comments there that everybody in the United States should have to listen to this webinar. Let's spread the word as widely as possible and continue to build the resistance. And thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Madeline. Thank you all. Don, Frankie.
Great job, Madeline. Great job, Bob. Great job, ZAKI.
Great job, Bob.
Made a comment.
All right, thanks all. Good
And
night.
vote for Madeline.
ZAKI.
If you live in New Jersey, vote for Madeline.
Thank you. Running for New Jersey governor, and I take up the issue of Palestine, as you can
Vote
tell.
early, vote often.
That's how we do it in Illinois.
Yeah, thanks.